fall is a great time to knock out some of the tough weeds in your pastures. We're going to talk about what to look for and when are the best timings for you and your farm. We'll also talk about a couple things to avoid.
All right, the most important thing that I want you to understand is your spraying needs to be done prior to your first hard killing frost. In fact, I'd like it done 1 to 2 weeks prior to your first hard frost. Here's the other thing. You've got to think a little bit about when can you get this done. I'll just give you the example on our farm. We start soybean harvest around the 25th of September every year. Okay, if I'm going to get this fall spraying done in my pastures, well, it's got to happen before soybean harvest, because once I get going with harvest, there's no possible chance we're going to be back out in those pastures for at least a month. So here's what I'm saying. A lot of times, well, even the segment of this show is called fall pasture spraying. What I'm saying here is maybe it's late summer pasture spraying. Technically, fall doesn't start till September 21. On our farm, though, about a September 10th, September 15th time frame works right based on, hey, frost is going to occur 2 to 3 weeks later, and so is fall harvest.
The reason this timing before a frost is so important is because we're often dealing with perennial or biennial weeds. They're going to have an extensive root system, and in the case of many of the perennial weeds, like Canada thistle, for example, they've got an extensive rhizome system underneath the soil. What we need to do to control those weeds is deliver a lethal dose all the way down into that root system and to each growing point along the way. That means we need quick uptake of the herbicide, and we need a high dosage of herbicide at a time that those plants are going to bring it down into the root system and store it. So fall offers this great opportunity where the plants are preparing winter storage to survive until next season. It's a great time to get that herbicide in.
The other reason why fall is such a great time to spray is if you can weaken that plant enough. Even if you don't 100% kill it, if you 80 or 90% kill it, well, maybe the winter finishes it off.
When we think about fall, we also have cooler temperatures generally than the heat of the summer. So we've got some opportunities to get out there where the plants aren't completely stressed out. Oftentimes we may get some moisture here, so the plants are actively growing. And again, like Brian said, we'd like to get out there before that frost so we haven't lost some of that vegetation above ground and had a big stress event on the crop. We also don't want to have a huge stress from drought or other things. It's going to be difficult to get herbicides down into a weed that's stressed out from the environmental conditions.
All right, usually when we're talking about fall spraying, we talk perennials and biennials because obviously the annuals are going to die. So what we also want, besides just contact activity, is residual control. Usually the products that we have discussed over the years have been either Tordon, Milestone, or Chaparral. The reason why it's important to get these products out there now is you do want to have that contact activity, but also we want to have the residual control there for the rest of the fall and then also going into the spring. For that matter, all those products I just mentioned, Tordon, Milestone, and Chaparral, they're probably going to last for several years. We usually say, hey, with Tordon, you might be thinking in the 5 to 10 year range. Milestone, you're thinking in the 3 to 5 year range. Same thing with Chaparral, 3 to 5 years, most likely that at least some of that residual is going to stay in the soil, at least killing some of your weeds.
Now certainly you have to adhere to any rotational restrictions or any grazing concerns when it comes to spraying your pasture and then letting the animals back in to graze. Also, another thing that comes into play in the fall is stalks. We get a lot of farmers who like to move the cattle off the pasture and out into the corn stalks. Well, if you're moving right from a pasture that's been sprayed with, say, Tordon, for example, the cattle are going to be ingesting some of that Tordon, which is safe for the animals. But as they leave their waste out in that cornfield, you're going to have droppings that include a little bit of Tordon in there, which is going to impact next year's crop. So keep that in mind. There's generally a couple of week window between when animals are feeding on hay or pasture that's been sprayed with Tordon to when you want to have them out in your fields.
Yeah, so just so we're clear on that, if you sprayed in the spring and your cattle have been out there all summer, chances are the amount of Tordon that's left in any animal or anything like that, it's pretty minimal. But where we do have a problem is for a guy that, let's say, sprays the 1st of September and then he turns the cattle out maybe the middle of September or the 1st of October, 2 to 4 weeks, generally speaking, is not enough.
Well, let's take on your two probably most important questions when it comes to pasture spraying. What weeds are we going to kill? What products are we going to use for those weeds? And then how much is that all going to cost?
Wait, that's 3 questions, Darren.
All right, whatever you want, Brian, but the weeds and the product selection, this is one thing. So when we think about annual weeds, sure, you could use something like Freelex or Distinct on them, but we're talking about biennials and perennials here. The best product on thistles historically has been Milestone. It works quite well. It gives you a long residual. Tordon also works pretty well on thistles. When it comes to leafy spurge, Tordon is certainly our first choice, and when we get to those woody species, Chaparral is often the answer there.
All right, in terms of cost, Milestone could be the most expensive. The full 7-ounce rate, you're going to probably spend $15 plus. With Tordon, you might be down in that $10, $12 range for a quart. And then we start thinking about Chaparral. Just depends on the rate that you're going to use. It's also somewhat expensive. You'll probably spend at least $10 to $15. But
well, here's the thing. It's going to last long though, Brian.
Right,
it's not going to be a one-year fix, especially if you're in the West and you're in a dry climate. You're going to get multiple years of activity out of this where the fields or the pastures in this case are going to stay clean. Now, if you're in an area that's a very high rainfall area, well, you might be spraying every year with these products. But still, you're going to get better residual out of these than you would with a 2,4-D or Distinct application.
Yeah, and the big thing is here, getting more grass production, that's what it's all about. Start thinking about your pastures like they are a crop. You're trying to raise as much grass as possible. You can't do that with all kinds of weed competition.
One of those weeds that could be in your pasture or out in your crop fields is our Weed of the Week. We'll show you how to stop it coming up later in the show.